We're at the end of our windstorm now, and I wanted to go back and compare what we saw with this week's windstorm to what we had back in November with our bomb cyclone. And one of the key differences is the strength of the two systems. Our bomb cyclone back in November was much stronger, and when we're measuring the strengths of weather systems, we're measuring them in pressure, and we measure pressure in millibars, and the lower the pressure of a system, the stronger it is. In our bomb cyclone back in November, we saw that pressure drop down to about 950 millibars. While our system here from this week, as it makes its way onto the coast, we saw that drop down to around 980 millibars. So there's one difference right there. Another one, the placement, the track of the two systems. Our bomb cyclone back in November stayed well out over the ocean, while our system from yesterday, you can see, tracking much closer to us and eventually made its way onto the coast. And you would think with it getting a bit closer that we would see much higher impacts, right? Well, somewhat true. Let's talk about that right now. You can see the system as it made its way onto the coast because it's got this well-defined sort of eye-looking feature before it makes its way on. However, as it gets closer, you can start to see that collapse to a certain degree, and it's going through a process, what we call here in the weather world, of filling, F-I-L-L. And as a weather system fills, it is weakening, and so we're starting to see that weakening process as it's making its way onto the coast. But you can see the timing too that is coming on closer to around midnight last night, and that's when we really started to see a lot more of the widespread winds pick up. Now, I did want to go back to one more point, which we were talking about the placement, right? With the placement and the track of the system itself, our bomb cyclone back in November was farther out over the water. It brought in a lot more of an easterly wind coming up and over the Cascades and also through those Cascade gaps, which both added as more of an accelerant to the winds themselves. And we also had a pretty big pressure gradient at that point. While our system from this week, well, it came in closer to the coast, and that brought in more of a south and a southwesterly wind here across parts of Puget Sound, as well as areas here over the Kitsap Peninsula and more of the lowlands. So that's why we had more impacts here as opposed to seeing the foothills back in November. And all of this a big example of how microclimates play such a huge role in our weather here across the Pacific Northwest.